Hello, in this episode of XRP News You Can Use, XRP steps into Wall Street in major fashion. Regulators also click the green light on institutional money to come flooding in, and Ripple's $1 million power play could just open the floodgates for massive amounts of money to be using XRP. Plus, I've got a few bombshells from the macro perspective of the economy right now. Let's get into it. So first of all, on May the 19th, CME is going to launch XRP Futures onto their exchange. Now, this is really important because this is the first regulated US venue for XRP futures contracts. Now, if you don't know what futures contracts are, these are really important, not necessarily because futures in and of themselves are important, it's because the environment around offering futures is really bullish for the next thing, which actually could drive the price of XRP quite significantly. And that is the environment in which you can host ETFs. And when you launch these futures on CME, you're basically opening the door for all of these large-scale investors to now have a regulatorily free environment to actually invest in XRP. Whereas before they couldn't do that because of the lawsuit and everything that was going on. That just there wasn't enough evidence for them there to say, let's dive in. This is providing to the US market a way in, and a completely regulated way in at that. This will obviously provide liquidity to the entire market as a whole. And the more liquidity you have, the more legitimacy you have. And I think that is incredibly bullish for XRP. By the way, today's episode of XRP News You Can Use, in my opinion, ranks about 85% bullish. That is a massive score. So we'll be watching out on May the 19th for any impact that might have on the price or any of the narratives moving forward about ETFs for XRP as well. And in our next story, Ripple has settled the case against the SEC and they're paying a fine of $50 million. And what's brilliant here is that they've paid the $50 million to the SEC, but haven't admitted any wrongdoing, which is wonderful. That's as good as you're going to come out against the SEC. What's great about this is that now that whole securities narrative that was clouding over the XRP world is now completely gone, and exchanges and brokers can relist without any fear about what's going to happen in the court case. And that segues perfectly into the new SEC chair, Paul Atkins, because he's now promised that there's going to be a clear regulatory environment where they're no longer going to go after people in the cryptocurrency space without any justification to do so. And this is all from a roundtable that happened on the 25th of April, just 3 days ago. So the agency is now switching from sue them first, kind of that kind of model, to the let's publish the rules, and if people operate outside the rules, then we go after them model. And I think that's the right way to do it. How did it get that bad to where Gary Gensler and Jay Clayton were going after people before any justification, without any rules? It's like having a field. It's like having a massive field of grass, not putting any signs up, and then suing people for walking on the grass. So we're changing from that mentality to now putting signs everywhere on that field saying, don't walk on the grass, or don't walk here, but you can walk here. And now if people walk outside of where they're supposed to walk to, then you can take some action. That's the right way to do it. And this story really adds to this idea that the regulatory floodgates are completely opening here. And as this institutional trust comes back in to cryptocurrency and the XRP space, money's going to flow in as well. And I can tell you, the only thing that was limiting these big companies from getting into this space, specifically the payment space, was because of how heavily regulated it was, how unclear it was, in the rules, and how much the SEC were cracking down on Ripple as kind of trying to make an example out of Ripple, and it was deterring everyone. So when we have the CME launch of XRP futures on the 19th of May, that's just one of the building blocks towards kind of everything just flooding in. And I think, like I said, 85% bullish on today's episode. It's like, this is really good news. In our third story of the day, third or fourth, I can't remember, Ripple bought a prime broker called Hidden Road, and they bought it for $1.25 billion. And as soon as I heard this news, I was like, what on earth about Hidden Road could incentivize Ripple paying over $1 billion for a company? In my mind, I was trying to think, how do we justify this? Obviously, Hidden Road have clients and contacts all around the world. Maybe these are contacts that Ripple didn't have or doesn't have, or that would strengthen Ripple's position in the world. I think probably all of those things. But even with the fees and the income generated from Hidden Road, how do you justify a spend of over $1 billion? And that's when it got me to thinking, okay? So The way in which Hidden Road is being used is basically by plugging in RLUSD as the stablecoin that is the collateral in the trades. If you don't know already, when trades happen, exchanges have to basically show you that they have enough capital in the background to be able to make good on the trades that are happening on the platform. So the more trades that are happening on the platform, obviously, the more collateral that exchange needs in the background. Now, just because it's RLUSD doesn't really change the function of these things. Exchanges and brokers will basically always hold a stable coin as their reserve. And usually, a lot of the time, they show their reserves and how much they have in their reserves to kind of give you confidence about using their platform. So I want you to think less about the RLUSD thing here. And obviously, that's quite exciting. But obviously, if Ripple are going to buy Hidden Road, they're going to use RLUSD. It just makes sense. But what this opens is another opportunity. Don't just think about the immediate things that are happening and the immediate story. Think about the ripple effects, no pun intended, of what that means. And so the way I looked at this was there's actually one massive price driver here. I want one massive reason why Ripple would buy Hidden Road, and it's multiple layers down. This is the theory onion, if you will. So you buy Hidden Road, you get access to all of these different institutions with lots of money that are already using Hidden Road as a prime broker. You have RLUSD in the background as the collateral for any of the trades that happen. Those clients that use Hidden Road now, if Ripple then went to them and said, hey, we have a software that can allow you to transfer money to anywhere around the world, between companies, between countries, between banks, and we can do it really cheap, and you can use our software. And the software, and actually I was about to get into this and like put a button on that and kind of say, and the software is XRP. But I'm saying that for you. What they would say to the companies is, we have this software that can settle your transactions in 3 to 5 seconds, and it's going to cost you barely anything. Do you want to use it? That's literally how the conversation would go. XRP is treated as a software by Ripple. But here's the extra element that goes past that. In the argument to say that they would, how do you justify a $1.25 billion purchase? Well, here's how you do it. If you know that you're going to engage with new clients and be able to ultimately offer this XRP software to those clients, you know that the requirement for XRP, the demand for XRP goes up, but the supply of it also goes down, because many of these companies might buy some XRP, as in they're buying the software to allow the liquidity, to allow the transactions to happen. So in buying Hidden Road, you automatically get a conversion rate as you go down that kind of theory. The conversion rate from how many companies we start with to use XRP, then how many companies are going to buy massive amounts of XRP as a software to allow it to transact and everything. What's going to be the impact on the price of XRP? The price will go up. Who benefits when the price goes up? We do. Of course we do. But who benefits probably the most? Probably the largest holder, or one of the larger holders in the world, right? Ripple hold a lot of XRP. If they can see, like, at the end of this purchase, this $1.25 billion purchase, the amount of XRP we have as a result of this purchase will increase, let's say 1.5x, for example. I'm just pulling out my butt. There's no research to show that. They know that their crypto appreciation, their XRP appreciation could even be sufficient enough to pay back the purchase of Hidden Road itself, right? So the purchase of Hidden Road gives you access to all these people, and the result of the access to all those people and their use of the software XRP increases the price of XRP, which provides extra justification as to why you would spend $1.25 billion on buying Hidden Road. That was my whole theory. Very interesting indeed. Story number 4. So Swift has come out and they have reconfirmed the absolute hard cut deadlines for ISO 20022 on the 22nd of November 2025. We actually talked about this a couple of years ago and how this was going to be the deadline. They've now reconfirmed that would be the hard deadline. That means all of the Swift payments and the language they use to do cross-border payments specifically has to switch over to ISO 20022. That's a language for messaging between banks. It's more important than you think. If you don't know anything about that, watch my last video. That will be on the screen somewhere here, or on the top right. Click that eye up there if you want to go and see it, but watch the end of this video first. The reason that's important to us, and this is the news that you can actually use, is, Ripple, on-demand liquidity, all of these different elements that they offer, and XRP are all ISO 20022 compliant, meaning that if XRP's technology and Ripple's technology allows Swift to do its job better, or can do its job better than XRP, and it can do it talking the same language, there's going to be a natural selection of technologies at some point. It would make sense that XRP is really well aligned to do everything that Swift does, and even replace Swift, which is what that last video was all about. So that's really interesting. That's just a date to look out for. That's the hard switch over. I don't necessarily think that's going to do anything to the XRP price at that moment. But what I will say is that it provides the environment by which XRP shines. Then decisions can be made and natural selection can take place. Story number 5 is that the dollar has now suffered its worst month since 2022, being that it's down 4.8%. in April alone. And basically China's come out and told all of the people that do business with China to not use the dollar and actually use yuan. Now, this is only interesting because when the reserve currency of the world, which is the dollar, has a little bit of a wobble or has a bad day, an environment is created in the world to where people think we need a different reserve currency. There needs to be a different way to engage with the finances and trade across the world. There needs to be a neutral bridge asset between all currencies. Now, when the dollar is devalued, that's the environment by which XRP becomes a higher talking point, right? And so I'm not necessarily saying that the dollar is going to crash. I'm not saying that because the dollar crashed, now it means XRP is coming in. No, the dollar crashes and it provides the environment by which XRP can be part of the conversation because it's just a better technology and it does solve the problem that arises in that environment. I hope that makes sense. And in story number 6, we all know that Ripple has powered the CBDC of the country Georgia, not the state, the country Georgia, and on-demand liquidity corridors in Georgia are now expanding. We've talked about this in many other videos, but what's really interesting is that lots of countries are testing XRP, testing the CBDCs, and in these testing phases, they use very small payment corridors. So instead of saying, yeah, let's open it up to all of our clients and all of our cross-border payments, they say, no, let's test our payments from Georgia to Laos, for example. That'll be a very small payment corridor. There was not much transaction volume going through there. And even with that transaction volume, let's say that transaction volume per year is $1 million, they might only do $50,000 using XRP, right? Because they're testing the environment. And so as they gain trust and they see that it works and they see that it works perfectly, they start to expand these corridors. So this is less about me saying, now is time for XRP to pump. No, what we're seeing though is successful pilots for CBDCs and now expanding the corridors because trust is also expanding all at the same time as the floodgates start to open on everything else. And I think this is really interesting. And that's why this episode is rated 85% bullish. So just as all of these institutions are now making plans to put themselves in the environment where XRP is basically the best offering, you too should also be making plans. My BlockFlow program has basically just turned 1, and looking back, we've had about 4,000 applications and we've only accepted 90 individuals. That's a 2% acceptance rate to BlockFlow, and it's wonderful because every single one of those 2% have had fantastic results in the program. And with a new course being added to the program over the next couple of weeks here that discusses wealth planning, estate planning, charitable giving, structuring your whole asset library and portfolio and wealth plan for generational wealth, there's been no better time to apply for the BlockFlow program. We're now opening up 10 more spaces for people to join the BlockFlow program and get some incredible results before this bull run picks up again and comes to an end. And I want to accept 10 more applicants into the BlockFlow program so we can get those 10 people all set up with their plan of action for taking profits, for generational wealth, for re-entry into the market, and what to do next. If it sounds of interest to you, please click the link below this video. There's also a pinned comment. At the end of the video too, you can click one of the boxes here and it'll take you straight there. All you got to do, answer a few questions. We'll see if we're a good fit. We'll jump on a phone call with you. Again, see if we're a good fit. And you might just be one of those 2% that gets in. If you enjoyed today's video, thank you very much. Hit like, and if you're not subscribed already, please hit subscribe. If you enjoyed this style of video, I'm going to bring this type of video to you every single week on a Monday. Let me know in the comments below by typing the word Monday if you enjoyed and you want to see it again. Stay emotionless. I'll see you in the next one.